Hello. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's event, Leadership and Transformative Change in Today's World. My name is Marilyn Elder, and I've been co-teaching a course with Heidi this semester called Leadership, Evolution, and Transformative Change. So tonight's event is connected to the course and sponsored through the East-West Psychology Department. So this course is really interesting. It's an exploration of leadership from the inside out. And in the course, students got to examine their core values and create a statement of commitment. And the course is also really about bridging theory and practice. So over the course of the semester, all of the students in the class got to create a leadership project that was an expression of their values where they worked with other people. So we're very excited about all the work that the students created this semester. Another thing about this course is it's a core requirement of the Eco-Resilience Leadership Certificate, which is offered here at CIIS. And tonight's event is an opportunity for us to learn from and share with these amazing thought leaders who have gathered here today from throughout the Bay Area. And I want to warmly welcome all of our panelists. I also wanted to share an overview of what's going to happen this afternoon. So basically, Heidi, my co-teacher, will introduce our panelists, and then we'll have a panel discussion with some moderated questions, and there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions of our panelists as well. We'll then have a short break, and after the break, we will gather for a World Cafe, which is a community dialogue. It's a way to tap into the collective knowledge that's here in this room. Today, we are also going to be having graphic facilitation, which is provided by Tom Kennedy. And graphic facilitation is a way to visually record today's discussion and themes that emerge. So I want to thank everyone for being here. And I would like to begin this event with a quote from Dr. Monica Sharma, who wrote one of the core texts we're using in the course. Quote, "Nothing short of a new level of worldwide leadership and commitment for sustainable and equitable change will suffice to create a better world today and for future generations. For the first time, technologies and resources exist to transform our situation and generate lasting results. The choice is ours." Thank you.
Thanks, Mira. Can everybody hear me okay? Hello? Thank you, Mira. My name is Heidi Fraser-Hageman, and I have the honor of co-teaching with Mira. Thank you, Mira, for that introduction and for co-teaching with me. Again, thanks to the panelists for showing up on this rainy day. Can't wait to hear your stories. Thanks to Tom again. I just wanted to first just point out the altar here. I mean, altars have been used since time immemorial. I like to have an altar in class with Mira as a way to acknowledge everyone who's come before us. It's got us to right here, right now, and it's a way to bring in the ancestral energy to the room and kind of mark it with something physical, and it makes our time together sacred if that's what we intend. Just before we dive in, I want to invite us to just share a moment of silence together. So whatever will help you fully arrive to the time that we have together and cultivate your presence for this lovely event. Just a minute to breathe together and be in silence. this first portion of the evening, each panelist will have 10 or 12 minutes to share their story with us, and then I'll introduce each panelist as we go. And first, I would like to invite Maya Evans to speak. Maya is a health educator and entrepreneur, currently also a lecturer at San Francisco State University in the health education department, and she's launching her health and wellness business for women of color, Hey Girl Health, in the new year. And she's very passionate for social justice, sustainability, and health equity. Welcome, Maya.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. So as I was preparing to speak on this panel, I was thinking, what am I going to say about leadership? How do I define myself as a leader, and what is it that makes me a leader? But before I talk about leadership, I really have to talk about something that really comes up quite often when it comes to leadership for me, and that is imposter syndrome. And it is something that that I wanted to bring up right up front, because it's something that I feel often, something that I'm feeling right now, like I'm on this now, right? And it's something that has really guided me, because it's something that I've had to really think about and really see in others as well, and it's really informed the work that I'm doing today. So I never really saw myself as a leader. I never saw leadership qualities in myself. I was a very quiet child. I was a very quiet teenager. And when I got to college, the first thing I wanted to do was be on the radio. So I was at my college radio station, KCSB. It was a public radio station. It was a mix of both community members and students. And I said, I want to be on the radio. This is what I want to do, right? But of course, I was still very shy. So I had my little AM show, and I was in my little room. And, you know, I had like 4 listeners, and I was fine with that. And no one noticed me, but I was on the radio, and that's all I wanted to do, right? And so, you know, throughout my first year, I was kind of living, you know, this very quiet existence in radio, and then the station advisor came in one day. And she came in and said, "Hi, Maya, right?" And I said, "Uh-huh." And she said, you know, so, you know, you have your radio show, how you doing? She's talking me up, and I'm thinking I'm in trouble somehow, because what did I do? Is it because I only have 4 listeners? Oh my God. And she really encouraged me to apply to be the station's program director for the AM station. And I was like, what is this lady talking about? Why is she coming to me? Why me? What is she thinking, right? But she really saw something in me that I did not see in myself. And that was a really powerful moment for me, to be seen and to have somebody say, hey, I know you're quiet, I know you're trying to hide, but I know that you're a leader. And from there, it really took off. From that, you know, I became program director of the radio station, went on to do promotion and events, and eventually became the radio station manager, which was the scariest position of all, because I really had to step into leadership. I had to run meetings and talk all the time to people, and I had to hire people, and it was this whole other thing. But it really allowed me to see that even though I may not see something in myself, other people may see it in me, and it is within me. And so I've really carried that example throughout every position I have done. And when that imposter syndrome comes up, which it does, as I said often, I say, nope, I can do this, I belong here, I can do it. Right? And so I know that's something that we all feel, so that's something that I wanted to share. So from there, I, you know, stepped in many leadership positions. I worked with them, years later worked with an organization called the Mosaic Project. Has anyone heard of the Mosaic Project? Yes. So it's a youth organization. They do anti-racism work, diversity and inclusion work, conflict resolution as well, with both children and adults, and I've been with them for over 10 years at this point. And doing the work with the Mosaic Project, we work mostly with youth when I first began, and then we branched out and we do adult training for corporate trainings and schools and things of that nature. But it was actually teaching a curriculum to children about how to be assertive, how to use your voice, and all of these things that I was teaching to children, that I had to learn those lessons myself. Like, wait a minute, am I assertive? Instead of being passive, instead of being aggressive, what is assertive? And so it was really in doing the work that I walked into the leadership roles and walked into what that looked like for me. From there, I worked in an organization called Generation Waking Up, where we were doing a lot of environmental justice work as well, and eventually decided, okay, I want to make a little shift. I want to go to graduate school. I wanted to go into public health, which was sort of a slippery slope, not a slippery slope, but sort of a windy road. Because I didn't know what public health was. I didn't really know, public health is very ubiquitous. It just covers so many things. But I knew that I wanted to work in health. I had a lot of health disparities within my family, a lot of folks close to me, a lot of communities of color, marginalized communities, and I knew that I wanted to work in health, and I wanted to work in these communities. And at first I thought about nutrition, and maybe I'll do that. But I was like, well, I'm not really interested in sort of, the biological or nutritional aspects of food. I really want to know, how do people get access to that food? It's not so much what people are eating, but how they get access to those things that we should be eating, right? And so that's when I really decided that I found public health, and I said, this seems about right. And I found San Francisco State's program, and I did their graduate program. And it was really for me. I made I always tell people I only applied to one school because I knew it was for me. I got it, I went. Some people have, a different road, and that's fine. And it was within that program that allowed me to really not only explore those different parts of leadership for myself, but also to just sort of be curious and do different things. I took a documentary class where we did a film on youth of color and access to technology. I did the Holistic Health Certificate program, so I'm certified in holistic health as well as public health. And so I really chose to do things a little bit differently. There's lots of folks in my program who worked in traditional public health jobs, but I knew that what I wanted to do in public health would look different, and so I explored all the things that were of interest to me and where I could really explore the things that really called me. So that was another important thing for me, that not doing what other folks were doing and really following my own path in that way. And then stepping back into leadership, and something that I also want to say is that as an undergraduate student, and in the years after, I did lots of different leadership positions. I was, always the head of a committee, or doing all these leadership things. But I also got burnt out. I really, I realized that I found this. Somebody saw that I was a leader. Now I see that I'm a leader, and I'm going to do all these leadership positions because people see these things in me. And I realized that every organization I would be a part of, they would want me to be in charge, and, which is great. It's a great compliment, right? But I realized that not all of these things that people were asking me to do were in alignment with what I wanted. And it took a long time for me to actually realize that. Is this something I didn't even question it, because hey, there needs to be somebody in charge. I will do it. And so from there, I actually went through a period where I stepped down from leadership. I stepped away from leadership so that I can do the things that were authentically in alignment with what I wanted to do and what felt right, what felt good for me. So fast forward many years in graduate school, and that's when I stepped into leadership once more. I was the president of my graduate student association, FOGS, Public Health Organization for Graduate Students. And I did lots of food justice work. We actually, our team worked on an initiative to get EBT accepted at the farmer's market there, an effort that took many, many years and many, many people, and we were able to do that. And then, of course, I started teaching as a graduate student, and I've been teaching ever since. So for me, I was able to step away from leadership and step back into it in a way and at a time that was right. I said, okay, I like teaching, and I had PA for lots of professors, and I've always been a teacher. I always say a teacher is a teacher is a teacher. You're either a teacher or you're not, and it's not a bad, good or bad thing. You can be a tutor, you can lead workshops, whatever, is your flavor. But a teacher is a teacher. You just kind of have it in you. I've always had it in me. I've always been a teacher in some kind of way. And so when I started teaching in an official capacity, it was just natural, right? And so, my experience from there, previous to that, was working with youth. So I didn't have, a long list of all these credentials to say, hey, I can teach at a university, which was scary. Again, that imposter syndrome is coming back up because, how am I qualified and how can I teach college? And oh my gosh, do I know enough? And all of those things came up, and I have learned a lot of lessons the hard way. But within that, it was sort of a trial and error process. The truth is, when you are passionate about what you're teaching, it's going to come through. It's going to shine through, and people are going to connect to that. And so I've always really followed that. I study, I make sure I know the material, but outside of that, I make sure that the way that I'm sharing the information, the way I'm sharing the material, is really connecting with folks. Who wants to sit and listen to somebody who's boring, or who is fumbling, or has curriculum that doesn't really connect? I don't want to sit in a class like that. So why would I make anyone else sit in a class like that? And so, again, just following what feels authentically me and following what's right. So then comes to this, latest chapter, entrepreneurship. Again, very scary. Again, that imposter syndrome is coming up because, oh my gosh, I'm running a business now? Oh, okay, I guess I'll do this. So something I didn't mention is not in my bio is I'm a DJ. So I've run a DJ business for a long time, but it's a little bit different because it's a creative field and it's just kind of what I do. It's an extension of who I am. But everything that I've done in DJing applies to everything that I do. DJ is a leadership position as well. You have a room, you have a crowd, you've got material, which is your music, you're reading the crowd, you're seeing what works and what doesn't, and it really applies to every single thing that I do. And I always say that DJing has taught me everything that I need to know about leadership, about public speaking, about just being in front of a group of people to do anything. And so with entrepreneurship, same thing. It's like, okay, this is not necessarily my field. I've mostly been in the nonprofit and educational space, but this is just another thing that I have to apply the same model to. So now with Hey Girl Health, it's just an extension of what I'm doing in my classes. So I'm all about health and wellness and equity. And for me, being a woman of color and knowing the challenges that come with that, I know that a business that caters to and centers women of color is really going to be beneficial for that community, and it's something I'm really deeply passionate about. And something that's just going to be an extension of everything else that I do. It'll just look different. So what I did is I did a business incubator through an organization called Centro in Oakland, and did a 9-month sort of, not really a boot camp, but it was just sort of a course that lasted 9 months and has really brought me to this point. And so I'm really just sort of on the cusp of, I'm doing all of the beginning stuff now. I'm really launching it. I'm super excited about it, but I'm excited for this next chapter. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Maya. We'll have questions at the end, so mark them down if you have them. And next we have Bridget Llanes.
It's Llanes. That's okay.
I should have asked you first. Bridget Llanes. So Bridget is the Community Programs Manager for Literacy for Environmental Justice, which is a nonprofit serving the Bayview community here in the city since 1998. And she facilitates culturally relevant environmental justice and stewardship programming at Candlestick State Park and provides support and mentorship through paid workforce development, Eco-Apprenticeships for neighborhood youth and young adults. New Mexico native, she has worked to support frontline communities from the South Bronx to Bayview Hunters Point in plant-based cultural healing through hands-on restoration and stewardship. Bridget Llanes. here we go.
Cool. This is going to be a little funny because it's right behind me, but
Do you want to get the podium?
okay, this is fun. Hello, welcome. I'm so honored to be here. I feel like this is such a blessing. I'm so grateful you went before me. So much you shared. I was like, oh, do I feel like an imposter right now? What am I doing here? I just thank you so much. I just wanted to appreciate your fire and all the things you said. It made me just kind of connect a lot of stuff and what I was going to share too. So thank you. I feel like I'm in the right place. Thank you to all of you who weathered the rain, came out here to hear us share. I'm eager to start having a conversation with all of you as well. So yes, I'm the Community Programs Manager at Literacy for Environmental Justice. I wanted to start by doing an Ohlone land acknowledgement. We are on Ohlone land. This is borrowed land. I'm a visitor. I'm not from the Bay Area either. I'm definitely a visitor. I'm definitely an outsider coming in with my own privilege and power. And as that, I hope that I am occupying the space with that acknowledgement as a guest, and that I'm benefiting from the Ohlone people's care of this land, like every single day, and that they're still continuing to care for this land. So, let's see. This could forward on its own, but maybe it won't.
You might have to point it back here.
Point it over here.
Try, yeah. All right.
If it doesn't work, it's okay too.
Maybe
It
try turning it off and on again, if that's possible.
You should be able to point anywhere.
Really? Okay, I don't know. It was worse.
Do you want help with the Okay, awesome. Okay.
Do you want to just call slide then?
Yeah. Cool, thank you so much, I appreciate that. It was supposed to just kind of go on its own, but so Literacy for Environmental Justice promotes ecological health, environmental stewardship, community development in Southeast San Francisco. We do this by creating urban greening strategies. This is like eco-literacy, workforce development. Basically, I work with Eco-Apprentices. So on the next slide, there's some Eco-Apprentices. They're awesome. They're youth from Southeast San Francisco. They are leaders in our community. I feel really honored to be able to work with them every day. They learn how to do stewardship from the seed up, and then also do replanting of our wetlands. They learn how to lead volunteer programs, and then they also facilitate environmental justice conversations. So I get the honor of being able to manage them somehow, which makes me feel like an imposter just thinking about that, really. So I've been working at Ledge only for about a year and a half. I've been doing this kind of frontline work since about 2004. Also, never thought about myself like a leader. I grew up without much of a support system. My dad and my mom, they fought a lot. Grew up in a lot of physical and sexual violence. Trauma is like something that I know and feel kind of all the time. Plants are really, they're really my ancestors. They're really what's moving through me and everything that I do. And so as I'm talking to you about leadership, well, in some ways that's leadership through plants. Continue to advance. And throughout the rest of this time, you can advance every slide. Like, it's not really specific, but these are just some of the youth that I work with. Many different groups, been really awesome. Safe places were in my imagination in books with plants. Out at school, I felt like I was surviving. In my growing up years, I felt like I tried to be as invisible as I possibly could be. By the time I was in 11th grade, I tried to drop out of school, had really severe depression, was using a lot of drugs, doing a lot of drinking. Because I ran away from home at 16 and kept running away over and over again, I had a court-appointed therapist. So I feel like it really, I think I had a suicide attempt at 16. There was like a pretty big turning point for me. And The suicide attempt at 16, without going way into details, I was at a park. It was Christmas Day in the evening. I had overdosed. I'd taken a whole bunch of pills. And I was leaning with my back against a tree. And I really felt the tree. Like I felt it supporting me, felt it grounding me. I was like, whoa. And then heard this voice that's like, you're not gonna die. You're not going out like this. You're gonna walk your butt home 98 blocks, because that's how far my home was. You're gonna walk 98 blocks in the snow. You're gonna go home, you're gonna puke, you're gonna come out strong. And I felt that and felt that tree, knew I didn't know the tree's name, knew I couldn't really even remember like what is north, south, east, west. No, I didn't have like a general orientation of the earth at all. But I felt so strong in that. So even as I'm puking and everything, I couldn't help but laugh, because I was like, something is here for me. You know, it wasn't a person, but it was a something. And then I had a therapist, Joe Jones, pretty powerful. He said that I always have choices, and I was like, I have choices? Crazy, I have choices, and suicide is always one of them, but it's just one choice. And I heard that, and I was like, I have choices. And being with him for 11th and 12th grade year, I was like, okay, well, I'm choosing to do things differently also. I'm going to just leave, and I'm going to start traveling. So I traveled for about 10 years straight, hitchhiking, working almost every place that I've been. I've been to 49 states, and throughout different countries in the world, just learning and absorbing different things. And again, I'm never thinking about myself as a leader. I'm just kind of allowing myself to be healed by plants, remember that my grandmother used plants because I saw her, and continuing to reconnect with this ancestry that went beyond people, and that was in all of us at the same time. So I ended up being in the South Bronx. That's a whole other long story about what brought me there, but I've been doing a lot of healing on the trauma that I had received through taking different kinds of medicinal plants. So I was in a place doing ayahuasca, met a tabacuero, so I had all kinds of just really cool things happening. And I knew I needed to be in New York City. So I go there, I meet Adesh Javadi with the More Gardens Fund, and then I start working with him to defend and protect community gardens for communities, Puerto Rican communities, communities from Dominican Republic. We were just walking down the gardens and making murals and all this stuff, and then learning how mushrooms actually break down dry cleaning fluid and diesel and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, this is it. And I'm doing it with youth. This whole time I'm like a young person, but I'm also working with other young people. And so without me knowing anything, he was like, you know what? I think you should run our summer camp. It's about, it's called Animal Adventure Summer Camp. I think you should run it. I had no experience running the summer camp. It's about connecting youth to the beauty of the South Bronx, the earth that was under the South Bronx. And it was so powerful. I did it for 3 years. I learned some techniques, like I learned some anti-oppression techniques from Esperanza Martel. I learned some like theater of the oppressed kind of stuff. It was super exciting. It was just a big time of learning for me. So then I ended up, because I got hit by a car, unfortunately, I ended up being here in the Bay Area. So here I am, still kind of following this like plant way and doing a lot of healing on myself. I actually received a lot of therapy from CIS, so I thought that was kind of funny that I was here. I was like, oh, this is where they learned how to do drama therapy with our women's group. Okay. So it was awesome. I was like, I'm not alone. I did some healing stuff at East Bay Meditation Center, continuing to learn about things, still not thinking about myself as a leader. But I realized I haven't gone to school. I'm in my mid-30s now. It's time for me to go to school. So I went back to New Mexico, went to the University of New Mexico, was getting my bachelor's degree in environmental planning and design. As I'm learning about like social determinants of health, about like systemic racism, about why constructed spaces can be so isolating, I'm like, oh, this is why, I'm growing up I grew up in some housing projects, and just like everything is kind of reconnecting with me. And I become a mentor and an academic coach at El Centro de la Raza. And it was really powerful, because then I'm like, okay, I'm being seen as a leader now. As I'm in these classes, I'm one of the oldest people in the classes. And I was like, oh, that's weird too. But then I became a leader, and I feel like for me, leadership is the facilitation of space, like the facilitation of spaces for gathering. So I feel like I'm that space in a way. Like, if I don't feel safe, what do I need to do to feel safe? How can I then facilitate a safe space? It's something that I'm working on all the time, and I have to do that by really checking in with myself first, asking myself what I need, making sure that I'm really grounded, and then being really aware of my environment around me, which is all of, it's like environment is such a weird word. Like when we break it down in these environmental educational programs at Wedge, it's like a question that people are like, I don't know. Like, what is that? It's like, where did that word come from? And I think it's really worth it to question that word. It's also worth it to question the word resilience, because I got to say, I had some challenges with that word. So I want to just speak to that just a little bit. So I'm going to read a quote from an Oakland author named Tommy Orange from his book, There. You know that? Yeah, okay. So awesome. Cool. Don't make the mistake of calling us resilient. To not have been destroyed, to not have given up, to have survived is no badge of honor. Would you call an attempted murder victim resilient? And then I looked at the definition: the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness, the often remarkable resilience of so many British institutions. That was an example from Merriam-Webster. I was like, I don't know. What is happening with this word? The ability of a substance or object to break back into shape, elasticity. And I hear it and I'm like, that's not me, because I break. As someone who was born like in a situation where I kind of am familiar with being harmed, there's no going back into a shape. I can't describe myself as elastic. As someone who's attempted suicide and known others who passed away that way, yeah, we break. It's real. I don't consider myself resilient, but adaptive. I'm like water. I give honor to water every day. I have to remember to drink it, because where I grew up, the water was so foul. You never drink the water. But I drink this water now, and I am water. Hopefully can be reflective like water. But also capable of creating change, like water creates massive change, right? So just wanted to share that a little bit. I think maybe that's it. I guess what brought me from New Mexico back to the Bay Area is that I had been doing this work with sunflowers. So I want to give a little shout out to my plant friends: nettles, plumajillo, chaparral, prickly pear, pau d'arco, osha, sunflower, all of these great plants, amazing healers. Sunflower helped me do the work that I did because sunflower turns radioactivity and things like that. There's been some research that talks about this plant and its ability to actually absorb radioactivity, absorb lead, and turn it into a harmless carbon. Is it doing that? They're trying to do that in Chernobyl. It's pretty incredible. So the research that I was doing was this work, brought me back here. I was doing work with more plants, education outside. I saw this thing with, it was like a tabling event for literacy for environmental justice, and I was like, what is that? Like, what is that? Just got really excited. Because I really enjoy using plants for that purpose of being that front line. Like, these plants are adapting kind of to our constantly changing environment. And yeah, So I'm just bringing them here today and seeing them as leaders and seeing myself as honestly as following them.
Wow, thank you so much, Bridget, for your share. Hello to Marilyn Elder.
Wow. I am so honored to be part of this panel. I mean, I've been writing down notes about so many things that I have in common already with people that I hardly know. And so for Maya, I was hearing about her passion, and I was hearing about that she was doing the work to learn how to do it. Really. And then following her own path. And I think that, where do you find authentic alignment? I mean, that's a huge question, and it's also part of my own story. And then she starts, she's a born teacher. I can relate to that too. And, the learning lessons the hard way, oh yeah. And then this kind of entrepreneurship that just sort of happens, and it's like, oh my God, what now? So, thank you. And then Bridget, plants are also my guides, my healers. Trees, I love trees. They're so wise. And thank you for doing this work, because God knows it's the most important work we can do. So I'm really touched. Ooh. So I want to thank both Heidi and Mira for this opportunity. I have to say, I've spent the last several days trying to figure out how to tell this story. And when I finally realized I needed to tell my story, not from the place of I did this or that or something else, and there was endless list, but more from the place of what really happened on the inner journey. How is it that one thing led to another, which led to something else? And what were the challenges? What were the breakdowns? And there were a lot of them. And I noticed that I tend to gloss over those things, because I really probably don't want to remember. But in looking at those and then looking at what pulled me back into what I wanted to do, I realized that I've just gotten a great gift already. So I'm really grateful to both of you for the assignment. And I've been doing my homework. So, all right, so, well, basically to start with, I think I have been doing leadership in one form or another for most of my life. Never because I wanted to be a leader. In fact, I, like you two, probably said, oh, I don't even know if I am or could be. But somehow or other, it just happened. And I think the way that the story goes is it started with my 21st birthday. So at the time, I was working my way through school, being a grocery checker at the local Safeway store. And my goal was to be a French teacher. I had always wanted to, la belle langue française. I don't know why. But in any case, so I was 3/4 of the way through the degree, and it was a pretty good paying job. I was working 3 to midnight. And then it became my 21st birthday. And so I wanted that night off, and I would ordinarily have had to work that night. So I went to the store manager and asked if he would give me that time off. In fact, I didn't even ask him in person. You had to write a note and put it in a certain place on the desk. I did. So the schedule comes out for the week, and there I am on the schedule, 3 to midnight, just as usual. And I thought, whoa. And so I thought, well, it must be a mistake. But I was upset. So I went to the store manager and I said, I assume you got the note that I sent you about wanting to stay off. I mean, it is my 21st birthday. And he just looked at me and he said, oh, poor baby, has to work on her birthday. Wah. And then he laughed and walked away. And that was my first introduction to corporate leadership styles. and the fact I felt so powerless, and he was such a bully, and that he could get away with it with impunity, it just absolutely flipped me out. And I thought, somebody's going to do something about this. This cannot be allowed to happen. So I vowed that I would do something about it if I could. Now, meanwhile, I was still working in the store, and and he was still there, and I really somehow felt like I had to at least finish my French degree. And, and I got a teaching credential to go with it. Well, in any case, at some point, so I was mostly just marking time because I thought, well, I'm going to get a real job, a real teaching job. And this is just, this is just what I'm doing now, and I'm just going to not pay too much attention and kind of motor through it. Well, then I started applying for teaching jobs, and I realized that there were no jobs. There was not the one job anywhere, anytime. And I had just spent between 4 years of high school, 5 years of college, and a teaching extra year. I'd spent 10 years on a career that was completely non-existent. Breakdown number one. And so I remember sitting on my patio, and I was so depressed I could just hardly move. I mean, I would go in, get something to eat, I'd come back and I'd just sit, and I'd just look at the trees. And then finally, I kind of had to come to terms with that. It was like, okay, this isn't going to happen. So what is happening? And so I began to look then at what was my work, what I was doing, and this, this incredible incident that I could not let go of about this bully. And so interesting how when I let go of one thing, of that, it took a lot to do that. But, what are you going to do, right? So I finally said, okay, wherever I'm going, it's not going to be that, it's going to be something else. And then a month later, I got a call from a friend of mine who was working in the employment office, and they had a job as a training instructor in the division office. Now, the training instructor's job was to first train, new hire employees. I was just like, oh, okay. But the other part of the job was to manage the store manager training program. Aha! And so, all right, this was it. And it was like a sign. And I thought, all right, okay, buddy. And I started working. And that really became the beginning of almost a 10-year climb up the corporate ladder. Now, what was interesting about it is that mostly people left me alone, and that's what I wanted, because my job, my passion, my goal in life was to change the corporate culture. I was not going to allow this to stand. I just wasn't going to do that. And so I became this woman on a mission with a vision. And of course, I had no way of knowing that it wasn't just one corporate culture, but it was the prevailing corporate culture of the entire country. And that was in the 80s. But I think ignorance sometimes is bliss, or at least it's better not to know what you're really facing, because I probably could. But instead, I actually managed so I started with the job that I had just taken, and I started redesigning the training for managers. And I started putting in a lot of human relations training. And I started putting in a lot of self-reflection training. And I started putting in awareness training. And all the values that I thought should be in a corporation, I started to design for. And it was interesting. So everybody in that division, if it was a store manager, ended up having to take that course, including the bully. He was very quiet that day, and so it was just like, okay. But people began to notice that something different was going on in this division around store manager training. And then I got promoted. And so I went from the smallest division to the largest division. And I had more responsibilities. And I didn't have to train new hires. I was only dealing with leadership issues. And so I started building more things. And I started looking at how do store managers get promoted to be store managers? Well, I think we might change that criteria. And so I've put in human-centered metrics as well as, the basics that they have always used to promote managers. And then other people began to notice that something was going on in that division. And finally, after 8 years, I got to the most coveted job that I wanted in this corporation. And it was the Director of Leadership Development for the whole company. 21 divisions, 168,000 employees, 10 foreign countries. It was like, I felt like I had the keys to the kingdom. It was like, yes! And so everything that I had done in the division work, I started to do at corporate level. So I was rolling out the store manager, and now I had put in an assessment center as well. So you had to be assessed for these certain metrics that were in the new training program as well as whatever else the big boys wanted. So in any case, and it was working. All of a sudden we were having better store managers, they were performing better, grievances were down, turnover was down, and things were, it was amazing. So I decided I would go for step 2. Step 2 was their bosses, the district managers. Now, there's many fewer district managers than there are store managers, but I was still kind of flying under the radar, and I was looking for alignment. I was trying to build alignment all the way up. So I managed to get it in, and all of the programs that I designed for them were designed to support human relations, understanding, and the kind of evaluations that I was looking for from store managers. They did buy into it. And then I also put in an assessment for district managers. So anyway, so then, okay, and nobody said anything. Everybody was going, yeah, right, good. Until I went for the whole enchilada. And the whole enchilada was the boss of the retail operations managers. There was only one in each division. And they were the number 2 person in each division. They were in charge of all of the stores, everything that went on in retail. So the week after I rolled out that program, I got a phone call, I got a memo, and I got a summons. And the summons was to come to the board of directors meeting the following Wednesday, and to be prepared to explain myself. So I came and I had charts and graphs and statistics and all these things. And it didn't make any difference at all, because what I had done is I had walked into the core of the power structure that maintained the status quo of the corporation. And so basically, I was told that none of these fancy programs really made any difference, and they simply eliminated them without further notice. And that I should focus on, lower level things that really needed to get done. And so, 6 months later, I quit. And I was once again out on the patio, looking at the trees, wondering what in the world I had done, what had become of me. It was like, wow. It was a pretty fast fall. And it was, and I felt, as with all breakdowns, or many of them, I was like, what did I do wrong? This is not fair. I was a victim of, the political, patriarchal, old boy network, blah, blah, blah. All of that was, of course, true. But I also had to say to myself, okay, well, you're only 35 years old. You might have to work. Like, what are you going to do? And so after I baked, I don't know, probably 1,000 dozen cookies and ate most of them, and just, oh my God. Anyway, and then I finally realized that I was going to have to do something else. So finally, a friend, thank God for friends, because I couldn't see it at the time, but a friend said, you know what, you didn't use the right approach maybe, you can't go head to head with a power structure like that, but you were right, what you were doing was right. And if you could simply reinvent yourself as a consultant, then you might be able to do everything that you're doing now for the whole industry. Now, I'd never been a consultant, had no idea how to run a business, but I thought, all right, damn straight, I'm going to do this because I didn't have any choice and because I believed, it was a passion. So I did. I started running a business. And in the end, it went for 14 years. Now, the most interesting thing about this, that is for the first 5 or maybe 10 years, I was a woman still with that vision. But if you've ever run a business and you have employees that have payroll needs and you have taxes and you have rents and you have office space and you have all these things. What happened to me was that I remember, I sort of started to lose that vision because I was just taking jobs that people asked me to do because it was going to pay the rent. And I didn't want to look at that. It was horrible. It was really, it was like my self-image was still as this woman with a vision. But finally one night in a meeting of 100 people in a ballroom, and I was getting up to speak, I burst into tears. I couldn't speak a word. I ran into the restroom and I sobbed for 20 minutes. And I really didn't even know the why. The why was that I had completely lost myself. I didn't even know who I was anymore. I had become something else, somebody else. And so you can't just quit a job that is your, where you have a 5-year lease and you have employees and you have all these other things. But I did take a break and I went on a vision quest. And so for 10 days, I finally got clear about what had happened in my life. And I realized that everything that I've been doing to date was actually not ever going to produce what I wanted, which was transformative change. Because I was really working on from a transactional leadership perspective. I was saying, okay, well, let me tell you what's wrong, here's a few skills, and that'll fix everything. Bye, give me my check. And so when I was sitting on the mountain for all that time, I realized that transformational leadership is not about telling someone else what to do. It is about how it comes from the inside. And I realized that, in the depth of this was the darkest moment of my life, truly. And from that, sort of the ashes of all that, I realized that I had to be the one first to reinvent myself. That it's not about that I had to go find the person that I was and locate that person from the inside. And that everything else that would ever follow would come from that. And so I enrolled in the Consciousness Studies program, which is a sister school to CIIS. I wrote my final project on how to, leadership, was on leadership, I think I called it inner leadership. And so I started to build a whole new understanding of leadership from that. And then they asked me to teach it. And so that became the beginning of what I call the second half of my life. And so from that came the PhD at CIIS, came a department chair position, program chair, all these other things that became sort of that phase 2. And in fact, it became the beginning of this course, the Leadership Evolution and Transformative Change course. And so I think maybe I just end with the fact that This is why these programs are so valuable. Because we have to know first who we are and who we are at our core in order to be able to really be effective as transformational leaders in the world. And it doesn't matter whether we're doing social justice or shoes. I think if we can do it from that place of engaged passion that is not about who we are, but rather about how we move the world forward, then we can be totally and completely. And I've seen that time and time again with everybody's very different stories, but also the same passion. And so, can I leave you with 5 things? Quick. 5 things. So here they are. I thought about this very much. This is, of course, my story disguised as your story. So 5 things to remember. Discover what fuels you, whether it is social justice or shoes, follow it and allow it to show you the path. 2, follow the energy of the path. Stay flexible to what is happening, not what you have planned to happen. 3, be yourself and trust your individual talents, gifts, and ways of being. Don't just take a job because that is sold at. 4, value others' individual talents, gifts, and ways of being, because you can create an awesome team that way. And that is a team that uses all the available talent and energy in the room for whatever purpose you jointly envision. And then 5, don't be afraid of breakdowns and setbacks, because they offer the most useful information to do it better or differently in the future. So if we can stay out of victimhood, these can make us stronger, wiser, and truly more resilient as we go into the future.
Thank you, Marilyn. I know we have Phoenix Smith also joining us. Phoenix is a certified ecotherapist, public health leader, and for the past 11 years has been an initiated priest in the West African Yoruba Orisha tradition. With over 2 decades experience in public health, healing, and social justice initiatives, she currently serves as director of the Alameda County Office of HIV Care within the Public Health Department. She's also a practitioner at the Women's Healing Clinic in Oakland, and as a leader of earth honoring ceremonies throughout the Bay, throughout her own community and with other indigenous healers. Her latest initiative is the creation of a National Ecotherapy Alliance, an organization that will provide ecotherapy certification, develop national standards of practice, and support communities to create social justice-oriented ecotherapy programs in their own communities. Welcome, Phoenix.
Thank you, thank you. I first want to acknowledge the Ohlone people and the Miwok people also of this land, and my ancestors who are from Texas, South Texas, and Mexico, and Africa. So they are the ones that have made it possible for me to be here today, so thank you all. I was a bossy child. So I never really did not think I was a leader. I was one of those little girls that was just telling people what to do when I was 5 years old. You know, Sheryl Sandberg talks about that, right? The COO of Facebook and her, she talks about let your children be bossy, let girls be bossy. And yeah, so that has fueled my leadership since I was 5 years old. I say that being bossy is just kind of a rough-edged leader, undeveloped. So I do know that I am a natural-born leader. That's just, I've always been in my home. You know, I'm the youngest of 5. I'm a social worker, so there are lots of problems in my household, lots of trauma, lots of things happening. I was always the one trying to fix it and take care of people, right? And that followed me throughout my life until I went to therapy and figured out that everybody's problems are not my problems, right? And that it's important for me to not be codependent and think I can take care of everyone. And that's been a lifelong lesson. And I have to say, as a Black queer person, my road to leadership in institutions, I worked mainly in nonprofit and government institutions, has not been easy. Patriarchy is real, sexism is real, racism is real, homophobia is real. I've encountered all of that in all of my jobs. And no matter what state or city, and even in the job I work at now, I've encountered that. So if you, I'm just keeping it real. So if you are, or I'm not gonna say if, because you all are on a path, a transformative path of leadership, you're gonna bump against the status quo. If you're not, you really need to check yourself to see what are you doing. You know, if you're not bumping against it, are you just going with the flow? You know, we're in a time now, we can't go with the flow anymore because the flow is burning the earth to death and killing the seas and, you know, et cetera, right? We need people that can adapt. We need people that aren't afraid to speak up. We need to have networks of practice. We need to have intergenerational relationships, intercultural relationships. If it's just you and a bunch of white people all the time, that's a problem. The world is not just white people. And if you're going to be working in environments, you're going to be working in very, very culturally diverse communities. That's the United States. People of color are frankly going to be and are about to outnumber white people. So you need to be able to navigate those kinds of environments, right? So one of the things that Marilyn said at the end, which is so important, which is know thyself. You really have to know who you are. And it's a lifelong journey, right? If you know that you're a person that is more a behind the scenes person, that you could still be a leader behind the scenes. And it's okay. All leaders aren't out in front. You know, I think about the civil rights movement, right? And I think about all the Black women that took care of all the peoples so that we could have marches, so that Martin Luther King and Bayard Rustin could eat, right? All those people were also leaders as well. Leadership is not always a person out front, right? It's not always a person that's the face. And also, knowing thyself is so important too, because it's really dangerous to be an unconscious leader. Look at who's in the White House right now. It's very dangerous. If you don't know yourself, or even care to know yourself, you will inflict more damage on people, right? More harm than good. Some of the things that have made me who I am, you know, we talk a lot about intergenerational trauma. You're at CIIS, so you know all the lingo, right? Intergenerational trauma. And part of my path, a major part for me has been healing that, is looking at my own ancestral lineage. Where did my grandfather inflict pain on my grandmother? Where did my great-grand, not about what did someone outside of my community do to my family, which of course is, I'm impacted as a person of African descent, as a descendant of people that were enslaved. Of course I'm impacted that, but I had to look at my direct blood lineage and really look at what was going on in my family. And it's very important, because you will find that you are probably repeating something right now that your auntie or your great-grandmother did, or someone in your lineage. And I also want to say that it's not just intergenerational trauma, but we need to look at our intergenerational gifts. We can get stuck in trauma. You know, trauma now, there's trauma-informed trainings, trauma. It's important, right? Because there's trauma that's happening all the time. Most of us have some form of trauma. But what I see in my work, you know, I am at a level where my clients aren't people living with HIV on the street. My clients are providers. They're doctors, nurses, people that run clinics. They are traumatized, extremely traumatized. They're burned out. They, you know, don't have the opportunities to take care of themselves the way that they need to, right? So I try to model a way for them in this very toxic governmental system on how to create wellness and to take care of them, to take care of communities, right? And one of the ways that that I do that is I'm very blessed and very fortunate that I can show up in my full self at work. People know that I'm queer. People know that I practice an African indigenous religion. People know these things about me. I don't hide who I am. I'm not saying to put yourself at risk. It has not always been safe for me to do that. But the position that I'm in today is the first position in my career where I can bring all of those parts of me together and it works, right? People look to me and call on me to support them, right? And I think of myself as a servant leader, a person that serves the community. And part of that is from my ancestral lineage. My mother did not have a college degree. She had a GED. She was married when she was 16 years old, had 5 kids, right? But she worked in corporate America as a black woman with a GED, but they had a union. And she was very involved in the union. She would take me as a little kid to the union meetings. So I grew up in like this social justice, like, oh, why is mommy in the union, and learning, oh, this is how I was able to get a raise, and this is how they can't just fire me. And then my father worked in the steel mills in Ohio. He was always involved in civil rights. He integrated the pool in Portsmouth, Ohio, just jumped in the pool because, black people couldn't swim in swimming pools in the 50s and the 40s. So that informs who I am. I grew up in an environment where my parents were actively involved in social justice. They didn't have advanced degrees. They did not have 20 years of therapy like I have, right? So their path was very different. They weren't able to heal their wounds in the ways that I have. But their passion for the truth and teaching me that has stayed with me, my entire life. Where now I bring that's an important value to me in my leadership is truth. And when you work in systems and you start to tell the truth, as her story demonstrated, people will shut you down, especially if you are a woman or a woman of color or a queer person. Patriarchy is alive and well, even in this institution where it's mainly women that work here, right? But the truth is so important. How do you convey that? Is a very nuanced thing, right? But one thing that has always helped me is I've always had mentors. I really believe strongly in mentorship. So I have a mentor in my spiritual practice. I have a mentor, and I mentor people. And this has happened since I started working professionally at age 21. Someone saw something in me and grabbed me and say, hey, look, I'm gonna show you how to navigate this. It took me a long time to graduate from college. I lived in an urban environment in San Antonio. My high school wasn't that great. I wasn't prepared for college. I got good grades because I'm naturally smart. But college was a culture shock for me. I went to a school where it was mainly people of color, Latino people, and black people. I don't even remember a white person at my school. And then I go to a university where it's all these white people, and there's these ways of doing things, that I didn't understand, and I didn't have a counselor, I didn't have any of that, and so, I started doing what people do. I was hanging out, I was partying, I was smoking weed, all these kinds of things. I got kicked out of school for a semester, but I went back and finished. It took me a long time, but that's kind of the trajectory of my life. It hasn't been oh, I've succeeded at everything. No, I have failed at a lot, a lot. But the thing for me is that I do get back up. I do get back up, right? And I learn from that lesson. And part of it is I have mentors, and I have mentees, people who I help, but I have a squad. Everybody needs to have a squad. You need to have your own squad, right? So people that you can go to and bitch to, but people that are going to hold you accountable and be like, girl, you're complaining too much. What are you going to do? You need to have those kinds of people around you because life is messy. Businesses change, things are constantly changing. We're in environments that there's nothing, the only constant is change. And you need to have allies and people that you can trust because it can feel very lonely and isolating, especially if you are a transformative leader. That means you are not going to be popular. Transformative leaders are not popular, right? You're not a popular person. Because you're telling people things that they know, but they may not want to really do or hear. Or they may not have caught up to your ideas because you're a little bit ahead of them, right? So you have to be comfortable with not being popular and being liked by everyone. If that's not what transformative leadership is, I don't know what it is. But that, you know, that's an important thing.
That's it.
Right? Another thing that's really important to me that helps keep me grounded is you have to have some system for how you make decisions in your life. Right? So for me, I have a strong spiritual practice, and I connect in with the earth and with ancestors, and that's how I kind of make decisions. I gather my data, I go inside, I journal, I may ask my mentor, may ask my mentee for feedback, I may ask friends, and then I have this other system what system do you use to help you make decisions? And I recommend or think it's important to have some kind of spiritual practice. I'm not talking about religion, but if you are a religious person, that's beautiful as well, but some kind of spiritual practice that you can develop over time and you can carry with you throughout your life, right? It's very, we all know we live in climate disruption, it's a climate emergency. Things are only going to get worse. I mean, that's the truth. Things are only going to get worse. The fires this year were worse than the fires last year. So what are you going to do to be able to maintain your balance, to stay true to yourself, right? One of the things I did this year that I never thought I would do, but I walked one of the roads, the Camino de Santiago. You know the Camino de Santiago in Spain? So it's been a very intense, 2 years for me. 3 years, elders in my family have been dying off. First it was my great uncle, and then it was my cousin. Then my mom got sick, then my mom died in January this year. And I took time off work to take care of her. I'm grateful to have a job where I can do that. I'm grieving, right? And it's just really disoriented me in a way. So I wanted the Camino appeared in my life like that, which many people will walk and say that's what happens. It appears in their life. I highly recommend you do it. I did the Portuguese route, which they say is the easiest, but it was not easy. But make sure you train too, because there were people a lot younger than me and they didn't train and they were jacked up at the end. So, but I felt like I needed to walk. And that is, a practice that people from all over the world have been doing since the beginning of time. They go on these journeys and they walk, right? And while I was walking, we walked a total of 150 miles with your backpack, right? And while I was walking, what came to me is that everybody needs to do some kind of a Camino right now. Because we are going to need what my spiritual teachers call firmeza, which is that inner strength to handle what is here and what is coming. And to be able to get that inner strength, you have to be tested. It is not something you can take a class for, that you can pay for, that you can get on the interwebs. You have to be, you're going to be tested in life. And that's just part of the way life is, right? There are different times in our lives where we're tested. Maybe you're tested because you get an illness, right? And you have to figure out how to overcome that, or someone in your family dies, or you get laid off, or you get evicted. You're in the Bay Area, we know that happens to a lot of people, or you get fired from a job. In order to develop that kind of strength, you're going to be tested, and when it comes, just let it come. Because that's part of the journey. That's part of the journey, and we really need to be able. You need to have some kind of inner strength to navigate life, right? And so for leadership, for me, it's really been about having those kinds of tools to help me navigate whatever system I'm in, right? I've been in environments where people don't value me because I'm a queer person, or because I'm black, or because I'm a woman. And so it's hurtful. It hurts you. I'm not, it's very hurtful. Right? But I had tools. I have therapy, I have friends, I pray, I have my ancestors to help me navigate each part of my journey. Another thing that has helped me incredibly, knowing myself, knowing what my values are, If you don't know your values, you'll go with the wind. You'll end up following a demagogue. You know what I mean? What are your values? And I guarantee you, if you look back at your ancestors, they're rooted somewhere in your family and your bloodline. What are your values? Maybe your values are being connected to the land because you know your people were connected to the land. Like really knowing who you are and knowing your values. Another thing is rites of passage. Going through some kind of, I'm going to say, earth-honoring, earth-based rite of passage is very helpful, right? Marilyn talked about going on a vision quest, right? My whole initiation in 2008 to the Orisha tradition was a huge rite of passage that totally changed my life, right? Graduating is also a rite of passage, but I'm talking about more spiritual-based rites of passage that are connected to the earth in some kind of way. A value that I think is very important for all transformative leaders to have is an earth-honoring value, right? It's like we cannot do any work now without thinking about the earth and all aspects of the earth, the sea, the water. You can't do every aspect of your work has to, or some aspects of your work needs to be threaded through there, right? So I've been working in these institutions and public health in a very kind of bureaucratic environment, and then in 2008 I was initiated, and I was in a place where I couldn't go out with the regular community because I was sequestered for a while. But one of the things that I could do is that I could go take walks by myself, and so I did that. And then I started noticing how I felt on these walks, and then I found eco-psychology, and then it led to one thing to another, and I graduated from the first eco-therapy program in the country. And since then, I've had 2 jobs since 2011, right? A long time. I have my very high pressure political, working with trauma communities in public health, but then I have the work that feeds me more, where I'm not always giving so much, where it's more reciprocity, is ecotherapy. And being able to, for me, like you listen to the trees, you listen to the water, messages are there for us, right? And so by me doing that, I created my own practice. I didn't know, I was like, well, I have experience in training and this and talking to people, and I'm like this, and so I just made stuff up. I mean, I did, really. Yep. I made it up. I mean, how do you think these certificate programs are made here? Somebody does a thesis or whatever, then they decide to call it a certificate program. I mean, I didn't make it up based upon like, oh, I just have an idea. I had data. The data was my experience, right? I had 20-something years experience working in public health, working with diverse communities. I knew some of the research, and I had skills. So, I was able to carve out a niche for myself, which is still going strong today. And it's important to me because it's the one part of my work where I'm really in touch with the earth, right? So that is really important, is to find something in your work or your leadership where it's connected to the earth. Excuse me. Another thing I want to say is, I think one of the questions or something is like, how do you not allow yourself to be used or taken advantage of or something like that? Know thyself. It's really important. And sometimes it'll just happen. And you won't know it until you're like, oh damn, I'm being used, right? I mean, it's not about like being able to understand everything, being, so vigilant that you can't relax into who you are. But really learning from mistakes and learning where, hey, maybe I needed more of a boundary there. Really understanding boundaries is important. But then also, if that happens or when that happens, what I've done is reflect on how can I make sure that I don't make that mistake. I've made mistakes. Like today at work, I was supposed to do some report and I forgot. And I went to my staff and was like, oh my God, I made a mistake. So you can't be afraid to also say, oh my God, I messed up. Because that's part of learning and that's part of life. And women, we can be so uptight sometimes, and you just want to be, you know, right. You'll find many leaders, we all have a little type A, a little perfectionist, controlling aspect of ourselves. And in some ways that can fuel you, and in other ways that can like damage you, right? It can damage your health, right? So really being able to know what your limits are and being okay with that. What I found on my path in my career is that, and there's research to support this, I'm sure, that I became the fixer. Remember when I told you when I was a little kid in my house with all these problems, I was the one, I learned that in my household. So as I started to develop as an adult and to get these jobs, I kept getting hired for jobs where things were a mess and I had to come in and clean it up. And it took me a while to figure out, wait a minute, not only why are those things showing up, why am I choosing them, right? But then I talked to my squad, and I was like, and I noticed many women of color in my squad, they had the same experience. Because white supremacy will still look at women and women of color as you're the person to come clean their shit up. That's real. That's real talk. And so I had to really do a lot of internal work to be like, okay, not just be a victim, like, oh, why do they keep it? What in me, what within me where I was choosing that over and over again? And that took another level of healing, another level of therapy, another level of spiritual work, another level of having peer groups and support where I could be reflected, where I could get feedback. And now I have to say, like, I'm so much better with my boundaries at work. Like, my favorite phrase is when they ask me to do something, I'm like, I don't have the bandwidth for that. And sometimes I just say it when I do. And I had to do that to practice the muscle. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not saying to be like facetious or like, you know, disrespectful. Because I was so conditioned as a young child to come in and clean people's messes up and do that and do that. I had to really be like, practice that muscle, and I had to practice, what am I going to say? Because it's hard to say no, right? So like I have these phrases, I don't have the bandwidth for that. Can I get back to you? Maybe just take a moment. You know, I like have these phrases now that I can pull out of my hat when I'm thrown in a situation and people ask me to do something that I don't really want to do or I'm not sure I want to do. Right? So I'm much better with my boundaries, and it's very important. I think that leaders, the thing is that you don't do everything. You help bring out the best in people, and you can feel comfortable being in the front or being the last one. Right? As I said before, if you're more of a quiet type of, I'm not a quiet kind of person. When I was able to accept that I'm just a fiery kind of person, things improved in my life. Because I wasn't trying to fit into some like, oh, I'm just quiet. Like, that's not me. That's not me. I've never had imposter syndrome. I told you I was a bossy little girl. You know, I really was. I'm not saying I don't have insecurities, but I had to really understand myself in various ways. So some of it was Western models through Western therapy and Myers-Briggs and those kinds of things. And then some of it is indigenous methods of understanding and knowing yourself, a combination of things, so I can learn about myself as I developed. You know, when I turned 30, that Saturn returns, ooh, it's crazy. How many of you, anyway, it's crazy, right? That Saturn returns, oh my God. So, you know, I made sure that I take time out to have retreats for myself. Because I have this fiery kind of personality, what happened is, with the fire, you're I'm a fire person, is that you can get burned out, right? That the fire just goes, and that has happened to me several times. So I had to learn, and I've learned from Chinese medicine, a lot from my acupuncturist, is that my constitution, being so fiery, you know, it's liver, gallbladder stuff, for those of you who know that, is I have to take naps. She's like, you need to just take a nap. Like every weekend, you need to just learn how to sit down and take a nap. And I do now, but she's right, because I'm a person that I can take a heavy workload, I would get used to it, and I would do too much, and I would get sick. I have been burnt out twice. One time I ended up in the hospital, severely depressed. I was working in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown Medical Center in their HIV clinic. I was doing case management. I had a caseload of 500 people, all women of color with all these problems. And I was taking it all in, and I wasn't taking care of myself. So making sure that I carve out time for retreats every year, that's some kind, like for this year for me, my retreat was the Camino, but then also time for joy and to have fun. Because I've worked with communities that have experienced trauma, and I live amongst communities that have trauma. I live in East Oakland that has high rates of environmental toxins and all of that. I have to make sure that I access joy. It's not easy for me to play, to just have fun and play, because I'm like, I always want to, I'll be the one to work, or, and now people calling me for things. I have to carve out time to play. And so for me, one of the ways I play is with children, my friends that have babies and children. I hang out with kids because they keep it real, right? And I'm able to feel more relaxed. In ecotherapy as well, being out in nature, camping, playing, jumping in the river. Like, nature has really helped me to access play. Because, I'm an intense person, the work I do is intense, it's easy to not have joy, right? And one of the things that I love about the Black Lives Matter movement, among many things, is that it's opened up a conversation to Black joy. And in Oakland, the past few years, they've actually had the Black Joy Parade every year, right? Because it's very easy for people that have experienced trauma, that continue to experience systematic trauma in your neighborhoods and your families, it's easy for us to not have fun in our lives, right? And so that's for me too. So, you're all very serious scholars, and I'm sure you're doing very important work, but just make sure you also carve out time for daily joy, whatever that is. I love comedies. I go to comedy shows. If I could have another life, another career, I would be a comedian. Like, I watch, documentaries about comedians because I'm just fascinated with the medium, right? And so that's a way that I'm able to be more relaxed. As I go to comedy shows. I have friends that are comedians. I watch silly, crazy movies all the time. That's my thing. And that's how I'm able to stay balanced and to not let my fire burn out or burn up other people, right? Because that can happen as well, where, I can't remember that quote by James Baldwin where he talks about Black people in rage. Something about Black people, you can feel like you're enraged all the time. And that's very unhealthy. So as much as I love James Baldwin, I'm not trying to be enraged all the time, because that will hurt me, right? And there's this phrase that they say about Black women. You see it in the media in my community. People say, oh, Black people, they look so good as they get older. Black don't crack, right? Oh, they look so good. But you know what? As a public health professional and understanding health equity and disparities, we may look really good on the outside, but inside, we're suffering from major chronic illnesses. Right? So racism is damaging to your health, right? The fact that I'm here and I'm not an alcoholic or a drug addict or just some crazy ass person is because I have a spiritual practice. I have a spirit, that's what's kept me going and kept me fueled and helped me to heal all the things that I need to heal from. Because the society is not built for us. It isn't. Even if you're a middle-class white woman, it's not built for you. It's not. And so you have to create your own communities of practice, right? So have your squad, the people that you can go to all the time. If you don't have a mentor, find a mentor. A lot of people like mentoring, just ask. Hey, can you mentor me? Someone that you respect, that you know, and make sure that you mentor someone else. That you don't just leave here and go get your fancy jobs or create your whatever, that you're thinking about people in your community, thinking about younger people that you can bring along, right? So for me right now, I mentor a lot of young Black gay men, right? People are like, oh, you're a woman. They come to me. They show up at my door, and so I speak to them. It's not like I don't just confine it to young women. Whoever shows up at the door, that's who I feel obligated to, not in a burdensome way, but The only reason why I'm here right now is because of mentors and teachers that have helped me develop, that have helped, soothe over those rough edges that I came with when I was younger, that helped me to grow and helped me to see myself and helped me to develop the gifts that I had. I did not do all of this on my own. I had a lot of people, and I still have people, that give me opportunities. Dr. Craig Chalquist, who is here at the school, teaches East-West psychology, right? He and I have been friends for about 8 years. He taught the first ecotherapy program, and the thing, oh, me and this white dude, he's been a wonderful mentor to me, right? He's allowed me to have opportunities like this. We learn from each other. We're from very different communities and very different cultures, but what we have in common is our love of the earth, right? So I just highly recommend that if you don't have a mentor, get a mentor. And mentorship is an indigenous, it goes back thousands and thousands of years, I mean, if you think in Western society, in the Greek society, Aristotle, all of them, they had someone that taught them, and there was a lineage, right? And if you think of like Mexican curandera societies, it's a lineage. You don't just show up and pay them, they're like, okay, I'll teach you. There has to be some spiritual connection, right? And mentorship, it lasts for the rest of your life. Like my teacher, he's like, I'm here for you for the rest of my life. It's not something that I'm just doing while you're at this particular stage of life. Because none of us can do this on our own. None of us can do this on our own. And as women, as femme-presenting people, one of the values that we have that is very helpful is our desire to be in community as women. We talk to each other, right? And one of the things also that can be very damaging is that we talk to each other, right? And that we can become so wanting to be part of the crowd and part of the group that it's hard for us to break away and forge our own path because we don't want people to think that we're like going against them, right? So, I encourage you to think about where or who is going to be part of your community of practice. Who are those people? Intergenerational relationships are so important. I am 51, and I have friends that are 15 years older than me and 15 years younger than me, right? My team right now at work is an intergenerational team. We have a couple of millennials, and we have people that are older than me, and it's really, if you're going to be any kind of leader, you're going to walk into a situation where your team might be people that are 60 years old and 25, who have very different cultural identities, and how can you navigate that? And part of it for me is I have developed relationships with people who are older than me, who are younger than me, and who are from different cultural backgrounds as well. Another thing is I'm always connected into the community. So yeah, I work in this public health job, but I'm part of this Women's Healing Clinic Collective, and we do pop-up clinics. We've been doing them for about 4 or 5 years. I'm one of the practitioners. I'm not one of the leaders or the organizers, but it's been so healing for me because, in public health, in order to get services, you have to fill out a lot of paperwork, and maybe you have to wait in a long line, and maybe they ask you for all your information, and there's so many barriers for people to get good quality care. And in order to get insurance, you have to have a job, or your partner has to have a job. At the clinic, at the Women's Healing Collective, there's no paperwork. You just show up. And we have holistic practitioners from various modalities, from massage therapists, acupuncturists, curanderas, people from, and we create a village. And it is the most rewarding thing I have done. And I don't get paid for it, but it's the most, I get so much healing from that, from being connected to this community. I'm also connected with people that do environmental justice work, connected with people at Planting Justice, and I live over in East Oakland. I participate in indigenous ceremonies as a visitor, right? And I know the protocols and I've learned the protocols on connecting with indigenous communities because it's so important that we don't, do cultural appropriation. I think just because we went to a class at CIIS and that means we can, I'm like, no. And I tell people, like, for example, they just had the Indigenous celebration, right, for Thanksgiving, and it was the 50th anniversary of Alcatraz. And I wrote on my wall on Facebook, like all the tickets were sold and people were asking white people to give up their tickets. And I have a white friend, I have many white friends, and a white friend, and she was like, well, Phoenix, don't you think white people should be honoring the land too? And I said, of course, but it's not just about the land, it's about the people. And I said, do you know that Native Americans in the Bay Area have the worst health outcomes, even worse, even poorer than African Americans? Highest rates of suicide, highest rates of poverty. There are so many ways to serve. And if you love indigenous communities and ceremony, there's so many ways for you to be able to volunteer to help. You're being trained as a therapist, give free therapy to Native American people. There's Native American Health Center in San Francisco and Oakland. I'm sure they would love to have you, right? And and it's about entitlement. Entitlement. When do you step back? There are times where I need to step back, right? As a queer person of color, I don't always need to be the one speaking. And you need to know thyself and have humility. When is it that you need to step back and let other people step forward, right? And so it's not just about honoring the land, it's about the people, right? And there's so many ways that we can do that with Native American communities here, so many ways to serve that aren't about going into their ceremonies, right? So really having cultural humility. There's a doctor named Melanie Turvalon who coined the term cultural humility. She is an MD and PH, a black woman. She does these wonderful trainings and talks about it, and really brought it into the medical field and public health field. Cultural humility, though, should be everywhere. I'm not talking about diversity and inclusion, no. I'm talking about being able to have humility, to understand where your blind spots are, and to be able to respect and honor other communities. So I just want to close with a few things, right? So know thyself, right? And there are various ways to know yourself. Western therapy is good, spiritual practice is good, spending time with your family after you've gone to therapy is a good way to know yourself. Being in situations where you're not the majority and you have to learn, that's very important. Knowing what your values are, and they may change, hopefully they may change as you grow and get older, right? Having a squad, your group of allies and people that you can count on, people that are older than you, people that are from different backgrounds or who are younger than you, having some kind of system that you can go to for guidance when you have to make important decisions. Having some kind of spiritual practice that brings you joy, not a spiritual practice that makes you feel guilty and sinful. Throwing that out there. But a spiritual practice that can help you love yourself more, right? And finding some rite of passage that's a spiritual rite of passage is important, especially as you move to different roles in your life. Maybe you were single, then you get married, then you become a parent, or then you get promoted into a supervisory role. Those are really wonderful times to have some kind of a spiritual rite of passage where you're about to take on more responsibility or you're at a crossroads in your life. Those are very important. And then lastly, but I think most important, is that whatever you do, if it's raising children at home, that's a job, okay? It's a job, and I respect women that do that, and male partners as well, because men do as well. But making sure that whatever aspect, field, or leadership, or however it develops, that it has an earth-honoring component to it. That you're connected with the earth, that you're making sure that you are looking at yourself and your work from that perspective. It's so important as we deal with, climate disruption and all the things happening on the planet. So, yeah, that's it.